of the replacement of the West Shore Culvert, and there's been a lot of activity going on in terms of understanding the scope of the project and what the options are. And so tonight is an opportunity for you to hear from the engineer that's been engaged by the town about the project. As you know, we asked for questions in advance, and I believe we have 60 questions that have been submitted. So we're going to do our best to get through all of those tonight. And Maureen is actually going to address those as part of her, she's with Ranson Engineering, part of her presentation. And she'll address those questions, as many as we can. We'd like to try to be done at 8 o'clock. We'll see where we are at that point in the process, and we'll sort of assess it. This is something that's going to take some time in terms of the defining the actual scope of the project, the design, the permitting, the engineering. These drawings that we have are really sketches, so we'll have to go into a much more detailed engineering, hopefully once we've already selected what kind of bridge is appropriate for the project. So we've got a meeting in 2 weeks, another public hearing, and the various government agencies, two from the state of Maine and one from, oh yes, I'm sorry, I jumped right in and I forgot something. Let me hold there. We have some housekeeping that we need to tend to. I want to introduce Dan Kramzet, and he is the chair of the Mary Grant Committee. Dan, please.
Thank you, Tom.
Sorry about that.
So the Mary Grant Committee is a little parcel of property here in town. Everyone can access it. Everyone can enjoy it. It's a nature preserve. As a fundraiser this year, we had a raffle. We had someone donate a cord of firewood to us. Cut, split, delivered, hardwood, 16-inch lengths. We've been selling raffle tickets for better than a month now. So today we're going to draw it. The deal we made with the selectmen was that we were going to draw it tonight on camera before this whole public hearing got scheduled. So if you will just bear with me a minute or two. We'll see if we can get Maureen to draw a winning ticket for us, please.
Somebody's going to win. I'm not going to be me. Deidre Diadio? I'm probably butchering somebody.
Deidre Daddio. No, not here? All right, Deidre will be giving you a call, and we will get you a win delivered. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President. We appreciate your support.
Thank you, Dan, and thank the committee for all the work they did on this. So as I was saying, this is going to be a process, and we've got in 2 weeks, is it the 19th, I believe? Yep. The state agencies and the Army Corps of Engineers are going to be here to talk about the project. I know they'll be available to answer questions, but we're also going to want them to hopefully make a presentation about their views about this project and what they think is appropriate and reasonable from their perspective. Depending on how far we get tonight, I wouldn't be at all surprised after that public hearing, we may want another one. So the community has an opportunity after they've gotten all this information. There are various reports that have been, hopefully you found copies as you came in, the Ranson Engineering Report, copies of the questions. And there may be some more information that's coming out. So after the 19th, we may try to arrange another meeting for just a continuation of this so the public feels they've had an opportunity to express their view. The project will be done, our plan is to do that next summer. There's actually a defined period that the state has established for when that can be done. So this is going to take some time, but we have various steps we have to go through. But this is a really important time when we're trying to define exactly what the scope of the project will be. I'd like to introduce my colleagues here. Kim Stacy Horn, who's a selectman, has joined us tonight, and David Winsel, who's also the liaison with the road committee and the road agents. And David and those individuals have been working on this project. So I'm going to turn it over to David. He's going to kind of MC from this point forward in working with Maureen to respond to questions.
Good evening, everybody. I like the two road commissioners. We got the road commissioners here. Well, can you come up and introduce yourself?
Stand up.
Have the road committee members stand up.
So our two road commissioners here, the District 1 and District 2.
Will Langley, District 1.
Adam Dolliver, District 2.
And what do we, yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know. We got road committee members here tonight, I'm sure of it. Can you guys come up and introduce yourselves? We figured it'd be a good idea to have everybody that's involved in this, you know, tell them who they are. We only got two up here tonight?
Leslie Berland, Road Committee Chair.
Cindy Hart, Vice Chair.
Very good.
Okay, and I guess that's all we have for our road committee members tonight. So I'd like to introduce Maureen McGloin. Is that how we, did I?
McLone.
McGloin, okay, I'm
Yep,
sorry
no
about
worries,
that.
no worries. So,
She's the engineer from Ransom.
yeah, hi, I'm Maureen McLone. I am the the program manager for the Civil and Coastal Engineering Group with Ransom Consulting. So if you guys aren't familiar with Ransom Consulting, we're a firm, an environmental engineering and civil engineering firm out of Portland, Maine. We have offices up and down the East Coast. I am based out of the Portland, Maine office and have been in Maine. I guess I'm originally from away, but I've been here since 1989 and been practicing in the state since 1989 and have been registered as a professional engineer in the state since 1993. I know that was one of the questions, so I thought I would cut to the chase. So presentation-wise, and I mean, forgive me, I'm not used to this many people really being excited about culverts. So it's a little bit off-putting, but so let us go to the show, I guess. It's not letting me, so I'll just have to keep skipping one at a time. Why is this not moving? It doesn't want to seem to go forward.
There you go.
I'm gonna try that. I thought that would be easy.
There you go.
There we go. All right. So I guess I'll just have to skip it one at a time then. That's all right. We can do that.
Dan?
Maybe Dan, you need to push the button? Okay. What did you do to make it happen?
I did this, so we're highlighted over here, and then you can use the arrow keys.
Okay, I'll use the arrow keys.
Hang on a second.
Yeah.
It's almost like you pause the, so just use the arrow keys. That's going forward, that's back, and that'll go through each slide.
All right. Okay, so we've got an existing metal culvert over on West Shore Road. I believe you've probably all seen it. The existing culvert has got some gabion baskets to hold up that road. You've got limited roadway base above that culvert. And when I say limited, based on the survey that we had done, it's anywhere from 2 feet to 2.5 feet at its highest. Not really a great depth of road base over that culvert. Typically culverts are going to want anywhere from 2.5 to 3 feet so that they don't bend and buckle under pressure. So we've also got some steep slopes off that roadway that are being managed by those gabion baskets. Gabion baskets aren't typically used as retaining walls, but they are here. In that culvert, there's some visible deterioration of the material. The surveyors noticed that there is, in fact, they couldn't get inverts because the bottom of that culvert is starting to deteriorate pretty rapidly. And you can see, at least on this picture, that the highest water level is staining that culvert pretty good, so it stays fairly regular. In that culvert, there's approximately, and depending on when you measure it, there's approximately 6 feet of height between that water level to the top of the culvert. This culvert is also used for boats to access Square Pond. And I will note that the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife owns the parcel that is directly west of this, and there's a boat ramp there, and I think you're all aware of that. My understanding is, at least from photos, that boat ramp has been in existence since at least 2003 and was upgraded in 2018. This is the actual survey that was performed by SGC. SGC was out here for a couple of days in April. They took some water level readings, and they took some elevations in and around the culvert. They identified the edge of pavement for a distance of approximately 50 to 100 feet beyond the center line of the culvert, and then went into the pond and took some readings on the bottom of the pond as well, to try and make sure that we could determine an invert for the culvert. Where this is a closed culvert, the invert couldn't be completely determined because the bottom of it was rusted through. A little bit closer view of it. The culvert on the survey is currently shown as 8 feet diameter. It's a little bit unclear as to whether or not it's larger than that. I had in my notes from a previous visit that it was as big as a 10-foot diameter. The inverts are rusted out, so I think that the surveyor may have had some issues with verifying that dimension. The dimension doesn't seem to be round either. The water elevation in April when they were out there was approximately at elevation 516. The highest point at the roadway where that culvert crosses is 525. So the top of the culvert, again, is about, in this instance, is about 6 feet above the water level. Inland Fisheries and Wildlife has a boat ramp on Stiles Brook. So just to kind of go over some of the players involved in new culverts and replacement culverts. Typically, United States Corps of Engineers, or the Corps of Engineers, or USACE, they regulate activities in the waters of the United States under 3 main laws. The law that applies in this case is Section 404 of the Clean Water Act of 1972, which regulates the placement of dredged or fill material into waters of the U.S., including wetlands. And I've provided the CFR, so the Code of Federal Regulations there for you if you wanted to write that down and look it up for yourself. So examples of the kind of things that are regulated by this section: depositing fill, dredged or excavated material, ditch excavation activities in wetlands and associated discharge of dredged materials into wetlands, placement of riprap and road fills, bank and stream channel stabilization projects. And there are others, but I chose not to include them on this list. So in Maine, a project would require a Maine general permit from the United States Corps of Engineers, but an exception to that requirement for the Maine general permit for this project would include maintenance, including emergency reconstruction of recently damaged parts of currently serviceable structures such as dikes, dams, levees, groins, riprap, breakwaters, causeways, bridge abutments or approaches, and transportation structures. So maintenance does not include any modification that changes the character or size of the original fill design. So I think this is what folks have been referring to as the in-kind replacement. Emergency reconstruction must occur within a reasonable period of time after damage occurs in order to qualify for this exemption. This doesn't constitute an emergency reconstruction. This is the part where it's serviceable structures and includes the transportation structures. This would require, if we were to go by the letter of the law, this would require that the culvert has to be replaced in the same footprint as the existing culvert. And what I mean by that, so the impact to the fill, to the area of fill in other words, the footprint of the culvert, and the gabion baskets could not be made wider or longer either after construction or during construction. And to illustrate that, I tried desperately to use a highlighter on a PDF, and it at least is purple. So the area of the culvert itself is the larger area as it crosses the street, and then the area of the existing gabion baskets are shown as those little wings, if you will, just to put that all in perspective. And that appears out of order. All right, so these two are out of order. But the other party that is involved in regulating culverts is the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. And the Maine DEP administers permits for culverts under the Maine State Natural Resources Protection Act, which is Title 38, MRSA Part 480. So if anybody wanted to write that down, you can go ahead and look it up. Work on this culvert would be subject to an NRPA permit in compliance with Chapter 305, which is a permit by Rule Section 10, stream crossings. So to be eligible for a permit by rule, the stream crossing must be constructed in the in-stream construction window between July 15th and October 1st. Measures must be taken to prevent erosion of soil or fill material from disturbed areas into the resource by using silt fence, hay bales, stabilized slopes, and erosion prevention measures removed. If a perennial watercourse to be crossed is used for navigation, the crossing must consist of a bridge span or pipe arch with at least 4 feet of clearance during normal high water for boat traffic. Now, obviously, we all know that there is a boat crossing there, but in this particular case, we have a 6-foot clearance, so the existing culvert meets the criteria for DEP. In addition, hold on, let me, no NERPA permit is required, meaning you don't need to apply for a NERPA permit, for repair and maintenance of an existing crossing or for the replacement of an existing crossing, including ancillary crossing installation activities such as excavation and filling, and any protected resource, as long as the erosion control measures are taken to prevent sedimentation of the water, and I believe they will be. Crossing does not block passage for fish in the protected natural resource area. So that is really referring to the permanent condition, so that you're still allowing the fish to go back and forth. In the temporary condition, meaning during construction, that may not necessarily be the case. So for the replacement crossings of a river, stream, or brook, which is what we have here, the replacement crossing is designed, installed, and maintained to match the natural stream grade to avoid drop or perching, and as site conditions allow, crossing structure that are not open-bottomed are embedded in the stream bottom a minimum of 1 foot or at least 25% of the culvert or the structure's diameter, whichever is greater, except that a crossing structure does not have to be embedded more than 2 feet. Where we have an existing 8-foot structure, 25%, we are okay with a 2-foot embedment. But they will require that there's at least a 1-foot embedment.
I'm sorry, what did you say? I didn't catch the last part of that.
1-foot embedment is the minimum.
I see, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Trying to get it to move. Dan? It was going good there for a while.
Those are ran some packets there. We got some packets also up
It's,
here.
it's moving here,
F5, I think,
okay?
and then you should be able to advance, I would hope.
Okay. All right. Okay. So additionally, a project will be subject to a Corps of Engineers permit if there's any impact to freshwater wetlands, or if the project is constructed outside of the in-stream construction window, which I think we determined was July 15th to October 1st. So the tricky part of this is, in order to comply with the NERPA permitting requirements, the project will also require a main general permit from the Corps of Engineers. To avoid a NERPA permit, and also to avoid a Corps of Engineers permit, the project will need to include an open bottom or a structure embedded 2 feet. The difficult part is the construction cannot impact beyond where the general permit, beyond the existing footprint, or else you're into a general permit. If the existing structure is not, the current existing structure is not an open bottom structure, nor is it embedded. So in order to avoid a DEP permit, you've got to have an open bottom, or it needs to be embedded. In order to get a Corps permit, it has to meet the criteria of the original design, and it can't change the character. So compliance with these criteria may change the character of the original design, which may trigger a Corps of Engineers permit. So the two things are not necessarily mutually exclusive, and it's going to take some conversations with both the department and with the Corps of Engineers to determine what their opinion is as to whether or not it changes the character. Okay, so both the Corps of Engineers and the Maine DEP use Stream Smart design guidelines for culvert crossing designs, which include, but are not limited to, culvert spans meeting 1.2 times the bank full width of the stream. USGS Stream Stats criteria has identified Stiles Brook as having a bank full width of 12.6 feet, and therefore the span of the structure at the narrowest point should be 15.12 feet to meet the Stream Smart design criteria. I think that there was some confusion on the drawings where we identified the 1.2 times bank full width being equal to 15.12, and it was misunderstood that the bank full width was 15.12, but bank full width is 12.6. So substrate in the crossing needs to consist of natural boulders, cobble, gravel, and other sediment that naturally forms the stream bottom. So that's what they mean by the natural bottom. And what they would like to see is a substrate that mimics the substrate downstream and upstream. Stream Smart crossings include substrate that is either the existing bed material or mimics the existing bed, which would allow features to form such as pools and eddies for fish and aquatic organisms. Adding larger stable material within the culvert will allow these features to form sooner. And I just wanted to point out that the existing culvert does currently have a closed bottom. The idea with the Stream Smart crossings, and part of the reason that the Corps of Engineers and the DEP are using this criteria, is because they found that a lot of the culverts that have been put in place don't really, they facilitate movement of stormwater, but don't really facilitate the movement of the organisms either in the stream, around the stream, or even in some cases with the larger bridges, larger animals that use the banks of the stream to cross where a roadway would be. And so now we are looking at what I think is a better option with the Stream Smart design guidelines. And I think Corps of Engineers and the DEP are both on board with that. So the other thing that your culvert should do is at a minimum meet a 20-year peak flood event. This existing culvert does do that. The preference in design is for 50-year to 100-year peak flood event. Maine DOT is actually pushing hard for the 100-year flood event. And with the higher intensity storms that we have been seeing a lot more frequently, that's becoming more and more a driving criteria. So the USGS estimates for this particular stream that the 25-year peak is approximately 207 cubic feet per second. The 50-year event would be 238 cubic feet per second, and the 100-year event is 279 cubic feet per second. And that is the flow of the stream. Okay, so what the USGS is saying is based on the watershed that exists out there, that they've calculated, plus the size of the stream, that they estimate that the 25-year peak event, if water were to fall with a 6 to 8 inch at the 100-year event, that would be 279 cubic feet per second as a flow rate. Some of the other design criteria, I just want to make sure I'm in the right place here. The other design criteria that we consider is that when you're building these culverts, typically you're going to have to close the roadway. You've got about 50-plus homes beyond this culvert to the north, and they're going to require access not only for those people to get back and forth, but it's going to require access for emergency vehicles to get to those folks if ever there were an emergency. Those emergency vehicles typically require, in the order of 20 feet of width to be able to get through there. Not 20 feet of pavement, but an area that they're allowed to 20-foot lane. The temporary access that we evaluated in this, it can be either via an alternate route, so a detour, or a temporary roadway constructed. So if you don't have an alternate route and you don't have a detour, then you really need to provide a temporary roadway and construct a temporary roadway to be able to at least get cars around that excavation while you're in construction. My understanding is that an alternate route may be available through an adjacent property owner, and that was, sorry, Will, throwing you under the bus, that was per Will. That is not confirmed, but all of the assumptions are that there's an opportunity to have an adjacent property owner provide the alternate route. Now, again, if that doesn't happen, then you need temporary roadway construction. So if that alternate route is not available and you need the temporary construction of the roadway, that would absolutely require the Corps of Engineers and DEP permit. So the option one, which is the in-kind with no permits. As I kind of alluded to, that design might not actually be feasible without getting the permits. You're really going to be threading the needle in order to be able to design it without getting permits. The construction, if we can design it without needing permits, the construction can't go beyond the existing footprint. I would recommend to keep the roadway in place and to not accidentally over-excavate using sheet pile to keep that back. It's not required, but if you over-excavate, you need a permit. The head walls, based on the criteria about the change of character, may be required to be Gabion baskets. I would push that we don't use Gabion baskets in hopes that we could review an alternate that might still meet that criteria for the character and still be able to hold your road up. If, in this instance, you needed to provide a temporary fish passage, wow, that is really a lot harder to say than I thought it would be. Typically when I do these culverts, we have a permit, but we we let the stream continue to go through, either by keeping the existing culvert in place and working around it, or providing temporary passage through another culvert, a little bit adjacent to it, just out of the construction zone, so that we can keep that stream flowing temporarily. It's not I have done a couple where we have completely closed it off. It's not my favorite, because then you run into issues if you ever have a big storm come through, which did happen. The alternate route for this option 1 would absolutely be required. Like I said, if you don't have that alternate route, you'd need to build a temporary roadway, and that can't be constructed without a permit. Option 2 is the aluminum arch or a box culvert. So in the drawings that we presented, we looked at the aluminum arch, which is probably the more restrictive of these two options. You could potentially use an aluminum box culvert, which is a little bit squarer, rounded at the corners, not quite as arched. But in this case, and in all cases, you'd still need to have 4 feet above the water line. So you need the 4 feet above the water line for the boating access. Inland Fisheries and Wildlife recommends 8 feet for safe boating. You currently have 6. An aluminum culvert would require cover over the pipe to be approximately 3 feet. I think I alluded to that before. So currently there's anywhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 feet. 8-foot safe boating requirement would require the road to be raised approximately 2 to 3 feet. Raising the road would require roadway improvements to minimize slope differences and could impact abutting properties. I say could, but I think they will. The question on that would really be to what extent, and we haven't evaluated roadway reconstruction and the extent of the roadway reconstruction. I limited it here to there would be roadway improvements required. An alternate route during the construction would be preferred, but it is not necessary, as a temporary roadway can be constructed with this option, and it would allow traffic to go around. You can construct this option in pieces so that you can have traffic go around the culvert, and then you could be installing half of the culvert on one side, and then when you got ready to install the other half, you'd have to switch the roadway over. Not ideal, which is why I would suggest an alternate route. Additionally, you could make the temporary roadway be two-way traffic and much wider. It's a lot of work for. Option 3 is very similar. It's a concrete box or block. You could use a 3-sided concrete box to establish that open stream bottom, or you could use a block structure. I've used the blocks in a couple of different locations. The advantage of the block is that you can be constructing it in pieces and be backfilling as you go, and it allows you to open up the stream a little bit quicker. It's also cheaper, but we can get to that. Concrete box or block, similar to option 2, also must have 4 feet above the water level for the boating access. Inland Fisheries and Wildlife obviously still recommend the 8-foot for safe boating. The concrete decking can allow you to reduce the cover over the pipe. So currently, like I said, there's about 2 to 3 feet. The 8-foot would require the road to be raised closer to 2 feet than the 3. But I think you're still going to want to have some road base above the culvert and underneath your pavement. Similar to option 2, raising the road would require roadway improvements to minimize slope differences and could impact abutting properties. Alternate route, also preferred. Temporary roadway is also an option. Construction costs. So some of the things that we looked at with our construction costs, and I want to caution you that these are all preliminary and that they are based on the concept designs, not the final designs. So there will likely be additional cost for roadway improvements. in whatever form they take. And I want to also kind of stress that even with alternate one and that option one, we don't have enough cover going over the roadway as it exists, so you are still going to need to bring that road up. It may not be 2 to 3 feet because you're not increasing that height over the culvert or over the water by an additional 2 feet, but it's still going to have to be raised, and you're still going to have some impacts, just not the same extent. So we also don't include any improvements to that alternate access. So in the event that that alternate access is not a road that is currently graded or wide enough, we haven't included any additional costs to improve that access road. We haven't included any costs for temporary roadway. We're really kind of banking on your kind of butters to allow temporary access through a property. So in that same vein, we haven't allowed or included any costs for road widening or improving the alignment. This is an opportunity that if it were desired, that this would be a great chance to improve the alignment of that roadway. I know that there's several curves in that road, and it would be an opportunity to maybe look at some options to widen that roadway and improve the alignment. So the cost estimates that I was providing are based on recent projects that we've done and the cost to construct in 2022. But they're estimates only, and I would assume that in 2023 those costs, even for materials, are going to be increased by a minimum of 10%, and I would also assume that the cost for construction may increase as well. It's been fluctuating pretty wildly. So it's really hard to kind of pin down what those costs might be. So this assumes the construction of the roadway is for the expansion of limits of pavement and gravel base only. So in other words, we would look to, if we're raising that culvert, would be raising it, say we're raising it 2 feet, I would assume that we're not going to want to come down at that same, at a steeper slope and do this kind of thing as we're going around a corner. I would look to at least adjusting the slopes out, which means that we're going to have to add some gravel, and we're likely going to have to take the limits a little bit further out. That's going to be true for all 3 options. Obviously, options 2 and 3 are going to go out a little bit further. So I can get more into details on the construction costs, and I'm certainly willing to kind of review those costs and go a little bit deeper dive into those. Construction methodology was one of the reasons that drove that cost of option 1 a little bit higher. And the reality of that is that somebody's going to have to be out there and trying to construct this without any additional impact to that culvert area without requiring a permit. So I think that the time that it's going to take and the cost for that might just be a little bit higher than would normally be if all you were doing is just going out there and putting in the exact same culvert. You're trying to avoid a permit on this, so that's going to increase, I think, your construction costs, my opinion. The construction costs for options 2 and options 3, I think, are going to be fairly similar. I think that if you're shutting that road down, there are ways to kind of create and construct that by putting in the foundation blocks and building up. And from what I've seen in comparing the aluminum arch and the aluminum block, and the concrete block, the time it takes for construction is pretty similar. The area involved is pretty similar, and the costs have been pretty similar for construction itself. The difference in those 2 options is the cost of the materials. What we have seen over the last couple of years is a fluctuation in the cost of those materials. Last year, in 2002, the cost of the aluminum culverts was cheaper for materials than it was for the box culverts or for the block culverts. 3 years before that, the block culverts were the cheaper option. Both are good options. I'm a little bit partial to the block, but I have put in both. and it is dependent on the cost. So just in terms of showing a few of the options that we're talking about and what these things actually look like. This is an aluminum box culvert, recently constructed in Standish. This is during construction. It has an 8-foot, 7-inch open bottom. And in this particular case, the rise on this of the box itself is about 5 foot 4 inches, and it's a 3-foot block on the bottom. This is an aluminum arch that was installed in Yarmouth in about 2018. Believe it or not, that's 20 foot wide at the bottom, but it's only got a 3 foot 4 inch rise. This is a precast concrete block box in Gorham. It's an 18-foot span. The way that those spans are constructed, the decking is 4 to 5 feet wide, and they're put down in series and kind of pulled together. The blocks are very much like you would see like a Ready Rock retaining wall, where they fit together and they alternate so that you're not just building straight up. So they tend to be easy to install and fairly easy to move around the site as well. Same type of block used in York. York has also, this past year, put another 2 culverts in using this same style. Cost of the blocks was more expensive this year than the aluminum, but York opted to use this option because they were actually installing it with town DPW staff rather than having a contractor do it. And when they did that, they felt it was easier for them to just be able to stack the block. So the cost of construction didn't really wasn't the same with this option. They saved it by using their own forces. And that is primarily it. I know there's a ton of questions that we need to get to, so I figure I'll let you at them.
That's what I was just going to say.
Yeah.
Do you have a list of the questions?
I do have a list of the questions. And I know that Jen went through the trouble of reorganizing them so that they would be easier to deal with.
So we're gonna let you kind of go through the questions, answer
Sure.
what you can, and we'll go from there.
Okay. All right, so question 1. So this was, I think the first group were submitted by the Square Pond Association, so I'll handle all of the Square Pond questions first, and then I'll let you know when I'm switching over to the next. There's, Square Pond has 28 of them. You guys are busy. So what is the estimated total cost to the taxpayers of Ransom's option 3, including the actual construction, road reconstruction for some distance on both sides, widening the road, easement area, reinstalling guardrails, and purchasing additional easement areas from residents along the expanded width roadway? So that is a bit of an open-ended question because what I've looked at is a comparable costs for culverts of that size. If there is additional work to the roadway, so additional roadway improvements, I haven't factored any of that in. And that would have to be better determined at the final design. So once we get to final design and we have an option, we can provide a more detailed cost estimate depending on which way you want to go. On page 10 of the ransom letter, in the very last sentence, it is stated this concept would require a greater extent of roadway construction Cost provided was based on anticipated construction, but undeveloped design details could increase the cost of construction. What are examples of the design details? Well, that is a good question. So that really relates to the fact that at this point, this is a concept. Typically, we add a 25% for undeveloped design details, which are things that could get flushed out during detailed design that may increase the cost, or in some cases, but not usually, decrease the cost. Some examples might be whether or not we need to include any fabric, or whether or not we need to include any geogrid, whether or not we choose to go further in the limits of how we want to redo that roadway. All those kinds of things would play into it, whether or not you wanted to reconstruct the roadway, whether or not you wanted to get rid of the bends in the road. It is likely that the bigger the curve, or is it likely that the bigger the culvert, the higher the cost for design and construction? Yes and no. It's not always the case. Design and construction sometimes depends on the complexity, and it doesn't necessarily mean that a bigger culvert is going to be more complex. And I would certainly use the example of the in-kind culvert here, and that the design would be more geared towards, instead of just throwing in a culvert that looks exactly like the other one and still trying to meet the DEP requirements, you may have a little bit more design trying to thread the needle, if you will. Whereas the Stream Smart culverts are 1.2 times bank full width. Both the DEP and the Corps of Engineers are on board with that. Even the cost of providing that permit is fairly insignificant, because those are, at this point, self-verification forms. The bank full width of the stream is a controlling factor when determining the size of the culvert, which will have a significant impact on project costs. Write Pierce letter. And do you agree with this statement? Yes. The bank full width of the stream controls the size of the culvert. The size of the culvert has an impact on costs. Yes. Are you aware pontoon boats access Square Pond using the public launch and the current culvert? I'm aware that boats access the public launch and that they go through the culvert. I've not been out there looking at boats going through the culvert, and I'm not exactly sure why a pontoon boat is relevant, but I'm sure. Scope of work and cost estimate document from Ransom dated 3/2/22, revised 3/8/22. The size of the existing culvert is stated as 15.5 feet in diameter. In the recent Ransom report dated 8/24/22, the culvert is described in as apparent 8-foot culvert. What is the size of the existing culvert, and how is the size determined to support the language of apparent 8-foot culvert, and why did you use the word apparent? I tried to address this in the presentation. The surveyors came back with a culvert that was that they had measured at 8 feet. We had done some preliminary work and thought that the culvert was a 10-foot culvert. So I used the term apparent 8-foot culvert because it isn't clear to me whether it's a 10-foot or an 8-foot. What is the durability or useful life expectancy in years of a heavy gauge aluminum culvert similar to the aluminum culvert installations in Maine or in the Northeast? It really is going to depend on the environment, obviously, and the wall thickness of the culvert that you're using, the environment that the culvert is in. So in other words, it could also depend on how much material you have above it and how thick that wall is. But typically, you're going to expect to see a 50-year life on that culvert. It could actually be more and closer to 75 if it's done right. All right, what is your recommendation for the gauge of an aluminum culvert? The box culverts that I look at for the aluminum are typically, in this case, would typically be anywhere from 0.150 inches to 0.200 inches. What are the wait times and delivery times for ordering a heavy gauge aluminum culvert expected to arrive in sections versus ordering and receiving a cement box culvert? I would actually, that is going to depend, and I have to be honest that in 2022, the box culverts were almost a full season out. And when I say the box culverts, I'm looking at a three-sided box. When I look at the block, the concrete block that I showed the photos of, those depended on when you ordered the materials. If you ordered them fairly early in the season, so what I mean by that is if construction drawings are done and out to bid in the February timeframe, so the town of York was able to order their culverts in March, and they were able to get theirs in time for the July 15th window. Others, for the aluminum, it was a 6-week wait time. So, but still, if you order them early enough in the season, that wait time goes down. Can the town of Acton avoid construction difficulties due to the electrical wires above the culvert by selecting the aluminum option, since the aluminum option will not require a crane to lift a cement box in place? I don't think you're going to be using a crane to put the concrete in place. First off, you're going to be looking at a three-sided box, and they're going to come in segments, whether they're 4 or 5 feet, and those are going to be fastened together, and those can be installed with a backhoe. You can install the concrete block also with a backhoe, and you can install the aluminum with a backhoe. So I don't think you're going to need the crane. Is Ransom able to design a culvert with detailed specifications in bid documents, provide construction oversight, and provide contractual provisions to shift liability risk to the successful bidder, contractor, and the bonding company for the contractor to reduce, if not eliminate, the regulatory risk for the town of Acton? Well, we can provide the detailed specs and the bid documents. We can provide construction oversight, and the contractual provisions are going to have to be between you and the contractor and your attorneys. But I will leave that for the town to answer. Since the existing culvert and its present size withstood the Mother's Day flood of 2006, is it likely that a new culvert of similar size would be able to handle a similar 100-year type event? I would say that a culvert of similar size would be able to handle a similar event. My real question would be is, first, I wasn't here when that all happened, so I don't know how it handled it or how well it handled it or whether the road overtopped. I would suggest that you probably don't want the road to overtop, and I certainly would suggest that that existing culvert is not going to handle another storm like that. But you did say a new culvert, so I would say that yes, it could probably handle it, but it's probably not the best. Do you have information about the ability of the Pepin Culvert located about a quarter of a mile west of the West Shore Culvert regarding its ability to handle a flood event? No, I do not. How wide is Stiles Brook? So the bank full width, according to USGS, is determined to be 12.6 feet, and that's what's included in stream stats. We can go out and do and evaluate the bank full width in a representative reach. For the purposes of comparing these, we chose to use stream stats. Which way does the water flow in the area of West Shore Drive Culvert, east or west? I believe it's west, but the survey says it's east. Was the determination of the bank full width 15.2 feet, see footnote number 2 on concept plan and ransom letter, based on a field inspection by a professional working in the field and taking measurements, or was the determination made using stream stats? The determination was made using stream stats, but the bank full width is actually 12.6 feet, with 1.2 times the bank full width being 15.12, which is what was included on footnote 2. Did you consider or inspect the Pepin Culvert, 5 feet wide, 7 feet high, along Stiles Brook, about a quarter mile west of West Shore Drive culvert, in order to determine bank full width? No. In the event Ransom engages in a field inspection of bank full width, will the field work include the area of the stream west of Pepin Culvert to achieve a field inspection uninfluenced by man-made or natural disturbances? See Wright-Pierce letter. So, yes, we can. It can include the west of the Pepin Culvert, but what we're really going to be looking for is a reference reach that is going to be most representative of the stream itself, both on the bottom and the width and how the stream functions. We're not going to look anywhere adjacent to the culvert, because that's a man-made object, obviously, and we would want to avoid any man-made impacts like that culvert. Typically, we use a rule of thumb, so that for the width of an existing culvert, I tend to look anywhere from 10 to 20 feet times the width of the existing culvert downstream to see what that natural, it's just kind of a rule of thumb to see where we can find where that natural reference reach is. What is the estimated cost of a field inspection to determine the bank full width in this project? That's typically going to be about 4 to 6 hours, and we likely have 2 people out there. So we'd be looking on the order of about $1,200 to $1,800. For the purposes of this evaluation, if the intent was to go with an in-kind culvert, it didn't seem like it made an awful lot of sense to spend that kind of money up front to go out when we had that information available, and it's reasonably accurate from USGS. Can you describe the result of survey work regarding the width of the town road easement in the area of the culvert? That is shown on the plans, and like I said, in general, that's 50 to 100 feet beyond the center line of that culvert. We went out about 20 feet from the edge of the culvert, tried to locate the stream downstream, bottom of the stream, side slopes, water levels, edge of pavement. How was the ransom letter dated 8/24/22 influenced by a consideration of the size of boats accessing Square Pond? It wasn't. I wasn't looking at the size of boats. I was really looking at the function. And I got to be honest, like I said, I am a proponent of the 1.2 times the bank full width. I find that being able to pass the 100-year storm, and when I say pass the 100-year storm, I mean completely underneath without it overtopping the road, is a better design. And I think it's a better approach going forward with the fact that the storms seem to be getting higher in intensity. That's my preferred option, but certainly I would be perfectly fine if the board decided otherwise. It's not my culvert. But I didn't really consider the size of the boats. Is Ransom able to design an aluminum navigable culvert to be installed under the maintenance exception process? So I'm assuming that that is the in-kind process, and I think the answer is yes, because it would be in-kind and it's exactly what's there today. And we do know that it's got 6 feet of height, and so that boats can access it. Whether they can access it safely is not really My call. Okay. What is your experience in designing aluminum culverts in the Northeast over the past 5 years? Where and when? So I'm going to try not to take offense, but I have been designing culverts in the Northeast beyond the last 5 years, and I've showed some examples of where I have designed them. I would certainly, if the board requested, would certainly provide copies of all of that, plus references, if you need those. What instructions were you provided regarding the portion of the 8/24/22 ransom letter pertaining to the cost of the options? The only instructions I was provided were to make sure that I included an in-kind option. Did you consider an aqua dam system for creating a dry work area for this project as an alternative method to the method proposed in the ransom letter? Typically, we do use the aqua dams for working in the dry. We have suggested either the aqua dams or sandbagging it. I think there may have been some confusion because I think the method that we were looking for was for the sheet pile was really to kind of keep the road in place so that you weren't over excavating. It wasn't necessarily to try and create the dry work area. Would you like to further respond to the Wright-Pierce peer review? I really see no need to do that. I appreciate actually Wright-Pierce's review. It makes certainly a lot of sense to have somebody come in and peer review it, so I appreciate the fact that you guys went ahead and did that. I didn't see anything in that review that we were at complete odds on. Certainly there were some things that we disagreed on, but I see no reason to respond to it. Will there be adequate access for fire and ambulance to get to the end of the road during construction? Well, see, now there's the rub, isn't it? That's the thing that we need to make sure of in terms of whether or not we can get that adjacent property to provide and be able to provide that access. If we have to build a temporary road, then we will have to build it so that we can get fire and ambulance to the end of the road during construction. I mean, there's no two ways about that. So though that appears to be the extent of the questions from the Square Pond Association, I have two here submitted by Charlie, oh wait, maybe that was Charlie Slattery. So Jen, where are you?
We've lost her.
She's not here.
Oh, okay. Because she underneath, I think it's underneath, is the submitted by rather than ahead of, and I was reading it the other way. Okay. So sorry, Charlie, that was your question, and I gave it to somebody else. So again, from Charlie, what is the estimated time for construction to be completed? And that is going to depend on the option that you choose, but it's typically going to be in the 4 to 6 week time frame. What we've seen on the larger width culverts, and if we have to go a little bit deeper, we're seeing about a 3-week time just to install the culvert itself, whether it's aluminum, whether it's block. Then there's roadway reconstruction that has to happen on top of that. So depending on how far out you need to go, that could be another couple of weeks, or it could be longer. But just for the construction itself, or just for the culvert itself, it's probably on the 3-week time frame when you get the road closed. So the Town of Acton Road Committee, under permitting, does this repair constitute emergency reconstruction? Definition of maintenance states recently damaged. So no, it wouldn't fall under that unless there's something you're not telling me about it being recently damaged. Under permitting, modification cannot change the character, scope, or size of the original fill design. Does not use Ingabian baskets fall in this definition. It might, right? So that's something that really kind of is a matter of opinion. And unfortunately, it's not my opinion that matters. I would suggest that gabion baskets could be replaced with something that's a little bit sturdier, that could still potentially provide the same character, but we're not there yet. Under permitting, can you provide more clarity regarding permitting requirements, what is permissible and what is not? You need to stay, okay, I guess that really depends on which option. So option one, in order to replace the culvert in terms of option one, you would need to have a culvert that gets placed without expanding that limit of impact. You'd need to have 4 feet above the water level for the boats. That same 4 feet above is going to be required for options 2 and 3. With options 2 and 3, you'd like to have 1.2 times bank full width. With options 2 and 3, and where it is permitted, you can provide temporary roadways. You can provide fish passage, so from one side of the stream to the other, you can keep that stream operating continuously and not shut everything down completely and hope that there's no rain event. You can provide, in that same vein, fish passage with that permitting requirement. So under permitting, fish passage, should have read ahead, fish passage and NERPA permit is a stream crossing requirement. Under permitting, fish passage and NERPA permit is a stream crossing a requirement if passage is cut off. I am not really sure I understand the question. So if passage, under either one of those permits, I still don't understand the question. Do you have somebody over there that can maybe, the road commission, road committee?
Do you know that one?
Number 33.
Yeah, if, one of the requirements was you couldn't cut off fish passage, I believe, is what it said.
Yeah.
So if you cut it off, permits are required.
Yes, that is correct.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Right. But let me kind of back up a little bit, and that is fish passage isn't required temporarily. So in other words, there have been instances where they will allow you to shut it down. Oh, actually, that's been with a permit. Never mind. Okay, concept one, what are ramifications of raising the roadway? So in concept one, you're going to be raising the roadway probably not as much as you would in concept 2 and 3. What that means is you may not have to go out as far on either side to provide a better slope and to make sure that you can get into people's driveways. Concept one, are we required to meet the 100-year storm event? There is no requirement to meet the 100-year storm event. It's recommended, and I certainly would encourage it. Concept one, how much difficulty will overhead wires cause? Do you anticipate this being insurmountable? I don't anticipate it being insurmountable. I feel like if you do choose to put sheet piling in to minimize the roadway so that you're not accidentally over excavating, then they may be a bit of a hindrance to being able to put that sheet pile in. They're fairly low, and I don't know that you're going to be able to drive the sheet pile if that's the case. Okay. What is the clearance from high water mark, and how deep must the culvert be embedded? So the high water mark has to have at least 4 feet above it, and the culvert must be embedded a minimum of 1 foot. In this case, you'd want to go 2 feet. Concept 2, what is the clearance for boat passage? So the requirement is the same, but if you're looking at Concept 2, Inland Fisheries had suggested an 8-foot clearance would be safer. I think if we were to go with a box culvert, we could have a conversation with them about, because that's wider all the way through, whether or not that 8-foot would be a necessity. I think that's the part where we can maybe haggle a little bit with the folks at Inland Fisheries. Concept 3, why did Inland Fisheries say okay to reduce clearance from 4 to 3 feet? Actually, they didn't. And when that got brought up in these questions, actually it had come from Diano. I went back into my notes and looked at what we had discussed that day, and really what we were talking about was the 8 feet, but reducing the clearance if we could get to maybe a box. And it would also reduce, if we went and got to a box, we could also reduce the roadway height and how much we had to raise the roadway, because we wouldn't have to have so much fill material on top of an aluminum culvert. So really that was a misstatement on my part, because that whole conversation was really about aligning the roadway and what we could do to minimize the impact to having to raise that roadway. So concept 3, do you anticipate raising the roadway, and if so, by how much? I anticipate probably 2 feet. I think we may be able to kind of work that a little bit differently, but I would say at this point 2 feet. Cost comparison, what is the expected lifespan of each proposal? I would say they're all going to be pretty similar. You're probably going to get 50 years out of all of them. Can you tell us what the water depth, cavity height, and cavity width for each of the concepts would be an average water height? These are submitted by Diano Circo, Mainland Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. The water depth would be what the water depth is now, roughly about 3 feet. Cavity height and cavity width would depend on the culvert. I'd be looking at roughly 16 feet wide at the base of an aluminum arch or an aluminum box, and roughly 16 feet wide for the block as well. Now, when we consider the width of those, that width taken at the base is the footings, the foundations. So those tend to be a little bit wider than the structure itself. So if you consider that the aluminum structure would sit in the middle of a 2-foot wide box, you can assume that there's a foot on either side, one encroaching inside the culvert, one encroaching outside the culvert. So that 16 foot would be roughly between the blocks, so at the base, in either the block or the aluminum option. There's a note in the description of Concept 3 that refers to a conversation with the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife and a subsequent reduction in height. I may be interpreting that section incorrectly. Please correct me if I am, but we've not changed our view that we'd like to see at least 3 feet of water depth and 8 feet of height above the surface of the water and average water height to ensure safe navigation. Please clarify. And that goes back to question 39, where I admitted that I didn't read my notes well. So has Ransom Engineering taken existing conditions measurements of the average water depth in the culvert and average height between the water surface and the top of the culvert? If they have them, what are they? IF&W took measurements last September and got 6 foot 5 inches of clearance from the water surface to the center of the culvert on the Square Pond side and 6 foot 10 inches of clearance on the Stiles Brook side. The water depth was 3 foot 1.5 inches and 3 foot 2 inches. Property owner to let you allow that alternate access so that you're not having to build that temporary road. Strongly encourage that for any of these options. But that's having to build a temporary road is definitely a big deal. So.
Okay, any other questions?
I just have a quick follow-up. Andy.
Sure.
For 2 and 3, the concepts,
Yeah.
if you only went with the, instead of going 8 foot, if you went with 4, would that change the height of the road?
It would. I mean, it wouldn't make it go higher. It would change the height of the road from the concept that we've shown.
Okay.
So if we went with 4 feet above that, that would probably keep you even with where you're at right now.
So there'd be less impact on abutters? And it sounded like that might be possible with one of those?
It would be possible based on what DEP has suggested.
Thank you.
I think you might have to, Inland Fisheries might have a say in that. They do own that property adjacent, so. Yes.
Back there, Lee.
Oh, yeah, somebody back there
Back
first.
there.
Your analysis of the site is based on the 8-foot diameter of the existing culvert for concept 1.
Yes.
How much change would your analysis be if the actual culvert was the 10.5 foot diameter?
It really wouldn't, because it would be the same, we'd be looking at the same size as what's currently there. So we were evaluating that based on the fact that we have 6 feet of height and the fact that currently we have about 2 feet above the existing culvert. So if you were to go ahead and put another culvert in that's the exact same size, you're still going to have 6 feet above, and you're still going to have 2.5 feet above.
And you still have to raise the road?
You're still going to need to raise the road another foot. Just to be safe, to get that, get that gravel and a better depth of gravel under the pavement and above that culvert. Because I think you're probably seeing right now, I mean, it looks to me, and that maybe that culvert is kind of subsiding a bit. And it could also be because the bottom's rotten out, but whatever. Next, somebody over here, I think it was, oh wait, I'm not, you guys are supposed to.
No. Go ahead.
I don't want to screw up protocol.
I'm Ed Woods, and I am one of the abutters.
Okay.
And I'm actually reading a question here, which is a good point. On number 9 here, how would forcing landowners to redo their driveway or claim more property proceed under concept 3? And then the other part of the question was, can the town just take it, or would it have to be purchased?
This is something that, this is something that would come to.
Well, anything to do with the roadway, diverting, anything like that, that would have to go through us. And so I guess the question is, what now? Whether or not, what's gonna happen to the driveways, that'd be her question.
Would I be forced to redo my driveway because of the road being raised up, and then a cost to me? And then if you decide to straighten out the bridge, and you wanna, can you just take my property by eminent domain, I guess?
Well, I mean, we don't wanna go that route. We're not looking to do that. Now, I was a road commissioner for 9 years. Anytime I did road work and I had to alter your driveway, we had to fix anything in our right of way. If we obviously create an issue with your yard, town of Acton's gonna have to obviously fix that problem. Cause we know where it ends up if we don't. So, right now, I have spoken to Maureen about the entrances to the bridge and, both sides of it. And on, kind of coming up with some ideas of, how we can remedy that. It all really depends on what design we go with here.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be an impact.
I've got some ideas. I don't want to throw those ideas out until we kind of get to an idea of where we're going to roll here first.
And I am willing to work with you on that, and like I suggested, if you need to put equipment on the property while you're doing the construction, I'm fine with that as long as it's returned.
Yep.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
I don't know, did he call on you?
There's quite a bit of difference between option 1 and option 2 and 3 with regard to cost. And I'm trying to understand, there are certain things that you said you did not include in the estimations, and it appears to be a lot of the road-related work. Is that true?
That is true.
Yeah. So when you factored, assuming you don't need a temporary, that we hopefully can gain access and we don't need a temporary bridge, sort of put that aside for a moment.
Yeah.
When you consider that road work, I would imagine that's more substantial with option 2 and 3.
It is more substantial with option 2 and 3.
How much would that add to the project? I know you haven't done the work, but is that going to put these all in sort of the same ballpark when you factor that in?
It may.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, that was what I was trying to say.
Yeah, because, I think from the town's perspective, certainly cost is a very significant factor. But if we're otherwise looking at sort of 3 options that are very similar in cost, assuming you don't have to do a temporary
Yeah.
bridge, then that's very useful to have that.
Okay.
Thank you.
What'd you pick up?
Can you just sleeve it? Put in a sleeve?
DEP and Corps of Engineers wouldn't allow you to do that without a permit, no. And they wouldn't allow you to do it with a permit. They don't like it. Unfortunately. It would be a great option, but it's not something that they, I've run into this on other projects, and it's not something that they favor. So. I'm never going to say it can't be done, but I'm just going to say it's not something that they get behind.
Would concepts 2 and 3 require deeper and wider construction areas versus number 1? And what kind of impact would that have to a contractor?
So for concepts 2 and 3, yes, the impact would be wider. Like I had mentioned, you'd probably still need to go down 2 feet if it was embedded, but you could have an open bottom. So not necessarily that much deeper, but you are going to want to put any of those foundations below. So yeah, you're going to be a little bit deeper. In terms of the contractor being able to do that work, I don't know that it's going to make much difference to them.
What about the size of the cofferdams? Would they have to be larger than
The aqua dams?
the cofferdams? Or if you did the aqua thing?
Yeah, the aqua dams, they'd be the same size for both options 2 and 3, and be larger for smaller for option 1, because you're not as wide.
Back of the room, Bernie?
Needing a temporary roadway.
Yeah.
And option 1 becoming more in line cost-wise with the others. Would it be, do you have any way of predicting what option 1 might cost if we get into it and we do have to go through a permitting process and change plans and so forth?
If you go through the permitting process, the Corps of Engineers and the DEP are going to be looking for you to provide 1.2 times bank full width, which would be options 2 and 3. So option 1 is without the permits. If you do have to get a permit, you're going to be into options 2 and 3.
You've mentioned a couple times that option 1, there was a challenge, and I think you described you had to thread the needle or something. What does that mean?
Well, because what I look at is I'm looking at the Corps of Engineers. First and foremost, I'm looking at their requirements, and their requirements are basically not changing anything, right? Leaving it the way that it is. And if you don't change anything and leave it the way that it is, and put it in exactly how it is in the same character, maybe alter a few things, you can get away with doing that without a permit from them, okay? So when you have a DEP permit, or not a DEP permit, if you don't have a DEP permit, they still want you, in order to avoid a permit, you need to have an open channel or embedded. Since your current culvert is not open or embedded, you're not providing the same character. You're not providing the same culvert. So that means that Corps of Engineers could say, you're not providing the same culvert, you need a permit. Even though DEP might say, hey, sure, great, you know, you're providing an open bottom, you don't need a permit from us, but you are going to need one from Corps of Engineers. So we're trying to avoid both.
So what I got out of it when I spoke to you at one point was, because I've had the same issue when I've gone to put culverts, and I'm only allowed to increase it, what was it, 25% or 15?
If it's Corps of Engineers, you're not allowed to increase that area at all.
Yeah, back when I was, I replaced one up on Wilson Lake, I was only allowed to increase the culvert, I think it was 15%, but I had to embed the culvert. So by the time I embedded the culvert, I was actually, the culvert was less. Smaller in size.
It's smaller in size, yes.
That issue here.
You would if you use the same size culvert. In order to embed it and get the same cross-sectional area, you need to have a larger culvert.
I think that's something that I was, you know, if we take an 8-foot culvert, say it's an 8-foot culvert, and you say increase the size by, say, 15%, if you were really able to, what would you be? You'd be still under a 10-foot culvert. Then you had to embed 2 feet of it. You're a 7-foot culvert. Well, yeah, back to 8 foot, yeah.
Back at 8, yeah.
Back at 8. So, okay. Any other?
I'm going to say sure, go for it.
Okay. Looking at the design difference between 1 and 3, you have to maintain 4 feet above the high water. So that would tell me that you would be able to drop the road by 2 feet. And when you put your 2 feet of fill in over the Box Culvert, you would
Be right
end up
back where we
being
started.
Basically the same way you started.
Yep.
So option 3 might work out, once you get all the details, that you might not have to raise the road very much.
Yeah, like I said, though, if you're going to be designing the culvert, you have to understand that that 4 foot is basically a DEP criteria. I don't know what, I don't know what Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, like I said, they do own half that, they own that parcel right there. They do have that boat ramp right there, and so their criteria is to increase that height from the 6 feet that it currently is to the 8 foot for safe boating.
So if we didn't have to raise that,
Right.
we might not have to raise the road.
Right.
It all depends on what the government agencies say we have to.
Yeah, I think that's certainly something that you'd have to discuss with Inland Fisheries. I think, I know they made their point pretty clear that they wanted to have safe passage for boaters. For me, I don't know really what that means, except for they said 8 feet. I don't boat under the culvert. I even suck in a kayak, so I'm not doing it. So I don't really know what that means. So, yeah.
Do you think we may have a better shot of what he's talking about coming down to the 4 feet with option 3? If we look at the transportation, how the road will impact the hills and the side, by coming up 2 feet would be, you know, some road engineer may say that's very difficult to do with the 2 tight turns.
It is very difficult to do with 2 tight turns.
Passage, they say, well, you've got 4 or 6 now, go to 6.
I think that it's a conversation that we can follow up with Inland Fisheries. I know that he's expressed that they want the 8. Whether that means that it needs to be 8 if we go with a box instead of an arch or a round culvert, I don't know the answer to that.
I think we'll probably end up getting a lot of.
I think that's probably part of the big discussion on the 19th.
They're going to be coming on the 19th, Inland Fisheries, and who else is coming?
I think.
Corps of
Inland
Engineers?
Fisheries
Inland.
and Army Corps. I believe
And
all
Army
three have been
Corps. All right,
invited.
all
I don't know.
three. So that's going to be on the 19th, so that could help us answer more of these questions, because obviously they're not here tonight, but,
You know the thought process on trading away the arch to get to a lower height?
Meaning,
When you said that you could lower the height between the top of the water and the bottom of the
yep,
culvert.
sometimes the arches,
If you went to square.
yeah.
Well, I don't understand why that impacts going to the arch. Why couldn't you do an arch at 6?
Yeah, just because if you're in a kayak, it doesn't. If you're in a wider boat, maybe that makes a difference in terms of if you've got 4 feet above with an arch versus 4 feet above with a square.
But today we got 6 feet in an 8-foot tube. And I don't think there are any crashes in there that people are talking about. I don't understand the safety aspect of this.
The 4 foot is only driven by DEP. That's not driven
I
by
like
safety at all.
myself. That's perfect. I can stand in my boat and touch the culvert
And
and drag myself through.
So the difference between an arch and the box obviously is that you would have that height for a longer width. So that, you're not just in your boat only trying to hit the middle of the culvert. Maybe you get a little buzzed or something and you have to hit the sides.
Would a longer bridge shorten the water depth?
A longer bridge, meaning across the roadway or
No.
wider?
Wider, yeah.
Would it shorten the water depth? I don't think so.
Right now, your banking's controlled by that pipe.
At least one side is.
Right. Oh, I mean, in the culvert itself.
Oh, the banking's being controlled by the side of the box of the culvert?
And all of a sudden, you make it wider. Now the water can spread out. Is it gonna go low?
Doesn't work that way?
Very well.
It can maybe drop a little bit. I wouldn't envision it much lower than the 3, but we can analyze that based on storm events and kind of see what that might look like, but we haven't done that. You got 2 of you. You're going to wrestle it?
What do they mean by over excavated? What is it? An inch too big? What does that mean? Because you mentioned if someone's watching you, what do they mean?
So, yeah, basically, you're required to stay within the same footprint that current culvert has. If you go a foot over, you're no longer within the same footprint. If you go an inch over, technically, you're no longer, but I don't know how they would see an inch.
It's not how it was constructed originally. They don't give you any leeway.
Will, you got a question?
In the concept one design, do you have do you go with like the galvanized now, or is it concrete, so, let's say we go with the first option, do you think you'd not along the winter, you get the concrete culvert, if we were to go that route, so like galvanized?
I didn't hear part of that. So if we go with concept 1.
Yeah, and we go with the concrete culvert, right? Because that was the option.
Okay, that's option 3.
That's option 1.
can we use concrete in option 1?
Can you
That's
use
what-
concrete in option 1? Okay. In terms of like round concrete?
Yeah, because it said in like a little note there. on the
Yeah.
sides, and either, the same thing I said now, the galvanized or concrete.
Yeah.
Would there be any different, like ordering times, do you think? Could we, let's say we get this all done, you think we could do it July 15th of next summer?
I don't think there's going to be much difference in ordering times between concrete and the galvanized. But I can't be sure of that because we've had water pipe out for over 10 months now. So it's, some of these things are really dependent on what's market.
Can you tell me what the difference in longevity would be for the concrete versus a thicker gauge aluminum?
Most of these options are really going to have like a 50-year lifespan.
I'm sorry, I can't quite hear you.
They're all going to have they're all going to have greater than a 50-year lifespan or around a 50-year
So
lifespan.
concrete and the aluminum gauge
The aluminum gauge surprisingly is got a pretty substantial lifetime. Maybe not the one you have out there now, but the...
Well, the one that we have now, that's galvanized, right? That's not, correct? Is that
Correct. I believe so. It's corrugated metal, so.
If we went with option one and then found that we had to get into the permitting process, wouldn't we have all the money, we pre-ordered materials for option one and so forth? I assume that's out the window. And then we also, not only the expense of converting to materials for option three, how do we obtain them in time? And we also have that very narrow, a couple months to get this done, correct?
Yeah.
So is that accurate, Mike?
Yes, that is...
Valid.
Yeah, that is a valid concern. If you got partway started and they told you that you needed to have a permit, you would very likely have to change horses midstream.
But in that scenario, would not our engineering have taken that risk out of that equation?
No, because the construction part of it, if anything happens during construction that they ask you to they tell you that you need a permit. If I'm as an engineer, if I'm applying for the permits, that takes your risk away. If you don't apply for the permits, then that risk is on you.
But you still provide oversight to the project, is that correct?
I can, yes.
Okay.
So, we got about 10 more minutes here. We like to, anybody that hasn't asked a question, got a question? So I'll let Lee ask the last question, and then I think we're gonna wrap this up.
If I can respond, I just wanted to do a little follow-up. It was Army Corps of Engineers, after reviewing the site, that expressed that you should be considering this option one.
And we are.
Right, so does Army Corps of Engineering provide any flexibility in working with people that are doing work on existing culverts?
And that's a good question.
I would think
for
that
the
would be
Army
a
Corps of
question that you ask on the 19th, Lee, because they'll be here, and that's something we can, get that answered. Does that?
So, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why we're bringing all these people in, that we get everything cleared up, all these questions answered, and, Dennis, you got one more question?
Go
ahead.
I have a statement.
So I don't need to answer anything?
No.
Okay, I'll shut up.
As a member of the public, I would like to thank you for coming here tonight. I think you've done a great job answering questions, and I just want to say that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we got any more statements?
I like statements. Statements are good.
Are you going to be here on the 19th?
I am, yeah.
Okay, well, we thank you for,
Yes, thank you, Mark.
No worries.
so, do we have,
Good evening, everyone.
we're gonna make a motion to.
Before everybody